They say one bad decision can change your life forever. For Karen, it was fining me $500 for fishing with my daughter. For me, it was deciding I wasn't going to let it go. It started on one of those rare mornings where everything actually felt normal. After losing my wife the year before, moments like that were rare. My daughter and I were sitting on this little wooden dock, the early sun glinting off the water, her fishing rod twitching with excitement every time a bluegill nibbled at the line. For the first time in months, I saw her smile. Not the forced, "I'm fine" smile kids learn too early when they're grieving, but a real one, the kind that used to light up the entire room. I remember thinking, maybe this was the fresh start we needed. The house, the neighborhood, the lake. It was supposed to be a place to heal. And then, like a shark smelling blood in the water, she appeared. Mid-50s, athleisure wear way too expensive for what it was. Sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. I didn't even hear her walk up. Just her voice, sharp and shrill, cutting through the quiet like a chainsaw. "Excuse me! What do you think you're doing?" I looked up, confused, half expecting she was talking to someone else. Nope. It was me. It was us. She stood there with a tablet clutched in her manicured claws, her lips curled into a tight little scowl. "Fishing is prohibited," she barked, tapping furiously on her screen. "You're violating HOA regulations." I stood up slowly, trying to stay calm, trying not to ruin what had been a perfect morning. I extended my hand, introduced myself, explained we had just moved in, that the realtor had told us the lake was a community amenity. She didn't shake my hand. She didn't even blink. She just shoved the tablet at me and said, "That'll be a $500 fine. You'll receive a notice in your email." I remember my daughter tugging at my sleeve, her smile gone, replaced by wide, scared eyes. We hadn't even had a chance to unpack all the moving boxes, and already we were being treated like criminals. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her rules. But I looked at my daughter, still clutching her fishing rod like a shield, and instead, I packed up our gear, put my arm around her, and walked away. I didn't say a word. Not yet, because sometimes the best revenge is the one you plan slowly, carefully, completely. Karen Wellington. That was her name. A name that, by the end of it all, would practically be a curse word around lakeside estates. She wasn't just the HOA president. She was the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood. She walked the streets like she owned them, clipboard or tablet always in hand, always ready to spot a violation. Too many weeds on your lawn? Fine. Wrong type of mailbox? Fine. Christmas decorations still up in January? You guessed it. Fine. But it wasn't just about rules with Karen. It was about power. It was about control. She didn't enforce the rules fairly. She weaponized them. If she liked you, minor infractions were overlooked. If she didn't, well, you could expect a violation notice for breathing too loud on your front porch. New residents like us? We were at the bottom of the food chain, fresh meat. She looked at us, my daughter and me, like we didn't belong. Like we were an infection threatening to bring down her precious property values. And heaven forbid you question her authority. The realtor had tried to warn me, in her own subtle way. She had mentioned the HOA, sure, but she had hesitated when she said Karen's name, almost like she was warning me without outright saying it. I should have paid more attention. I had dealt with difficult people in business before. Egos, manipulators, even a few outright sociopaths. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the level of petty tyranny Karen Wellington wielded like a sledgehammer. That first encounter by the lake was just her opening shot. She thought she had taught me my place. What she didn't realize was that all she had really done was declare war. Back at home, after calming my daughter down and assuring her we weren't in trouble, I sat at my laptop and started digging. I pulled up the HOA's website first, a bland, professionally polished page with smiling stock photos of families enjoying barbecues and community picnics. Total propaganda. Buried deep in the documents section were the HOA bylaws, nearly 200 pages of dense, boring legalese. I read every single word. And that's when I found something strange. The lake wasn't actually owned by the HOA. It was owned by a private development company, Meridian Development Corporation. The HOA only had a lease on the recreational rights, and that lease, it was about to expire. Less than 60 days left. If the lease wasn't renewed, the developer could sell the lake to anyone they wanted. Anyone with enough money and a little bit of spite. My heart started racing. I dug deeper. Public property records, corporate filings, old city council meeting notes. Everything pointed to one undeniable fact. Karen was bluffing. Her control over the lake wasn't as ironclad as she made it seem. In fact, she was probably scrambling behind the scenes to secure a deal with the developers. If she could buy the lake, she'd have real power. She could turn it into her own private playground, build a gated marina, sell exclusive memberships, and push out anyone she didn't like. But what if someone else got there first? What if someone beat her at her own game? I closed the laptop and stared out the window at the lake shimmering under the setting sun. Karen thought she had won because she fined me $500. She had no idea she had just handed me the ultimate opportunity for payback, and I wasn't about to waste it. I wasn't about to go into battle alone. If there's one thing I learned from building businesses, it's that you don't take on a system by yourself. You build a team. So I started talking to my neighbors, cautiously at first, feeling them out without giving away too much. It was amazing how quickly the stories poured out. One neighbor, an older gentleman named Merrick, had lived there for over 20 years. Retired attorney. Sharp mind. He told me how Karen fined him for excessive foliage encroachment, because his rose bushes were supposedly 6 inches past some imaginary property line. Another neighbor, Maria, a nurse and single foster mom, told me how her 3 foster kids were banned from the pool for noise disturbances, while Karen's grandkids were allowed to host birthday parties there without so much as a warning. Diana, a young widow 2 houses down, got hit with 5 separate violations after Karen led a mosquito inspection through her backyard. The so-called violations: a bird bath, a kiddie pool, and a garden hose left coiled near her fence. And it wasn't just random harassment. There was a pattern. People Karen didn't like, new families, people who looked different, spoke different, or simply refused to kiss her ring, got the brunt of it. Meanwhile, her circle of loyalists enjoyed freedom from inspections, fines, and rules. The more I listened, the clearer it became. This wasn't a neighborhood. This was a kingdom. And Karen thought she was queen for life. It didn't take much convincing to get Merrick, Maria, and Diana on board. We formed a loose coalition at first, meeting quietly at the local coffee shop, sometimes at Merrick's house, once even at the back room of a bakery, whose owner Karen had fined for having too colorful signage. We started gathering information, documenting violations, pulling public records, analyzing HOA financials. Merrick, being a former lawyer, helped me navigate the legal minefield. Samuel Washington, a retired banker, joined us next, bringing with him years of experience reading financial statements with a magnifying glass for hidden agendas. Slowly, piece by piece, the truth came into focus. Karen wasn't just a petty tyrant. She was running a quiet little empire off the backs of terrified homeowners. Every violation notice, every forced property sale, every lowball purchase funneled right into her personal real estate company. And the lake? That was her endgame. Samuel dug into the developer's financial situation and confirmed what I had suspected. Meridian Development was hurting. Bad investments, pandemic setbacks, cash flow problems. They were liquidating assets just to keep their lights on. The lake, worth about $300,000, was a prime target. Karen had already made a backdoor offer to buy it through one of her shell companies. She planned to shut down fishing, restrict access, and eventually build 6 luxury lakefront homes, all owned, marketed, and profited from by her. She was banking everything on that deal. She needed it to survive, and she thought no one would even notice, let alone stop her. It was time to make my move. The moment I had confirmation about the developer's situation, I called in a few favors from my old business network. By the end of the week, I had quietly formed an LLC and made a cash offer, $350,000, more than Karen's complex finance deal could ever hope to match. The best part? The deal included a strict non-disclosure clause. Karen would have no idea who swooped in until the ink was dry. I remember sitting in that downtown office with the developer's executive, shaking his hand, sealing the purchase. I walked out with a copy of the deed in my hand, feeling like I had just stolen Excalibur right from under King Arthur's nose. The lake was mine. All 6 acres of it, and the 10-foot shoreline around it. Karen's plans, her dreams of lakeside lounges and luxury homes, crumbled the moment I signed. She just didn't know it yet. At first, I kept it quiet. I wanted to see what she would do when she thought she was still winning. And sure enough, Karen went into full power trip mode. She started sending out community newsletters with vision plans for the lake, photoshopped mock-ups of patios, cocktail bars, private boat slips. She held meetings where she hinted that only long-time supportive residents would have priority access. She even started pushing for a lake improvement fee, an extra $50 per month per household, supposedly to fund maintenance but really to pad her war chest. And anyone who questioned her? Immediate fines, retaliation, smear campaigns. One neighbor, James, a retired teacher, got cited for his American flag being improperly secured. Maria's lawn was suddenly out of compliance because her grass grew half an inch too high during a rainy week. Even my own driveway became a battlefield. I got hit with violations for unauthorized landscaping because I planted a rose bush in memory of my wife. The targeting was obvious, petty, and desperate. Karen thought she could drown me in paperwork, bleed me dry with fines, and shame me into moving out. She had no idea the storm she had invited into her life. Every new violation, every nasty rumor she spread about my daughter and me, every underhanded move she made, it only fueled me more. It made me more determined not just to beat her, but to destroy her little empire, root and branch. Because you see, the difference between Karen and me is simple. Karen plays petty games with little rules. I build entire systems, and when necessary, I burn corrupt ones to the ground and start over. And Karen? She was about to find out exactly what that looked like. The day Karen scheduled her big lakeside future celebration, I knew it was time to finally pull the trigger. She sent out glossy flyers, had banners printed, even booked a local catering company for finger foods and wine tastings. This wasn't just a party. This was her coronation. Her moment to show the entire community that she was queen forever, and that the lake, our lake, was her personal kingdom. She strutted around the neighborhood for days beforehand, hinting about special announcements and exciting developments that would ensure only the right kind of residents had access to the lake moving forward. She didn't say my name directly, of course, but the message was clear. Karen was about to claim her crown, and everyone else better bow or get out. I spent that morning finalizing everything with my attorney, going over every clause in the deed and every term of the expired access agreement. We crossed every T, dotted every I, made sure there wasn't a single legal crack for Karen to wiggle through. The truth was, she was about to throw a party on land she didn't even have permission to stand on. She thought she was in control. She thought I was just another angry homeowner grumbling quietly, while she expanded her empire. She had no idea that everything she was building was already crumbling underneath her heels. When I arrived at the lake that afternoon, the party was in full swing. White tents lined the shoreline, tables draped in linen, residents milling around sipping wine and nibbling on canapes. Karen stood near the biggest tent, holding court, laughing that fake laugh of hers, soaking in the attention. She wore a white sundress and a floppy sun hat like she was hosting a Hamptons gala. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. People whispered when they saw me walking up, some stepping aside, others giving me cautious, sympathetic glances. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. I made my way to the main tent, nodded politely to a few familiar faces, and calmly stepped up onto the small, portable stage Karen had set up for her speech. I picked up the microphone before anyone could stop me. Karen's smile froze mid-sentence as she turned toward me, confusion and anger flashing across her face. "This is a private event," she barked, starting to march toward me. I held up one hand, calm as ice. "Good afternoon, everyone," I said, voice steady, firm. "I hope you're all enjoying this beautiful day at the lake. There's just one small problem. You're all trespassing." The silence was immediate and sharp, like someone had cut the cord on a speaker. People looked at each other, unsure if they heard me right. Karen stopped dead in her tracks, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I pulled out a thick folder from my bag, the deed, the property maps, the termination notice, and held them high. As of last week, I am the legal owner of this lake and the surrounding 10-foot shoreline. The recreational use agreement with the HOA expired, and as the new owner, I have terminated access rights effective immediately. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Gasps. Karen looked like she might faint. I continued, driving the knife deeper. "You have 15 minutes to vacate the property. Anyone remaining after that will be considered trespassing. Officer Reynolds is here to assist if necessary." I nodded toward the police officer standing nearby, arms folded, watching the scene unfold with a neutral expression. Karen lost it. She stomped toward me, jabbing her finger at my chest. "You can't do this! This lake belongs to the community!" she shrieked, the composure she clung to so desperately crumbling right in front of everyone. I smiled, slow and deliberate. It did belong to the community, until you let greed and ego take over. Now, it belongs to someone who actually reads contracts. I watched the realization settle into her face, not just that she lost the lake, but that she had humiliated herself in front of the very people she ruled over. It was a complete collapse. Within minutes, residents started packing up their picnic baskets, folding up their lawn chairs, muttering angrily under their breath. Some threw Karen sharp, cutting looks. Others avoided her altogether. No one, not a single person, stood up for her. By the end of the hour, the lake was empty except for me, Merrick, Samuel, and a few of my closest allies. Karen stood there on the empty grass, abandoned, clutching her tablet like a security blanket, refusing to accept the truth. The empire she spent years building, the petty power she lorded over good people, gone in an instant. And I wasn't finished yet, not even close. The days that followed were pure chaos, but not for me. For Karen, it was a slow, public unraveling. She called an emergency HOA board meeting the very next day, trying desperately to rally her loyalists. She proposed suing me for damages to community value, claiming the loss of the lake was illegal and that I had somehow tricked the developers into selling it. Merrick, who still had a few friends on the board, fed me updates from inside those closed-door meetings. Karen screamed, threatened, begged, but it was useless. The more she ranted, the more she exposed herself. People started whispering, questioning. How could the HOA lose the lake without anyone knowing? Why did Karen never tell the community the lease was about to expire? What else had she been hiding? She tried everything. She called in political favors, tried to pressure City Hall into enforcing non-existent zoning restrictions. She floated rumors that I was a shady businessman with plans to turn the lake into a private golf course. When that didn't stick, she resorted to smearing me personally, accusing me of being unstable, vindictive, even suggesting I was trying to destroy the neighborhood out of spite. None of it worked. If anything, her desperation made people start questioning everything she'd ever said. People who once backed her blindly began to turn their backs. One by one, her strongest allies started resigning from the HOA board, citing personal reasons or a desire to spend more time with family. But everyone knew the truth. They were jumping ship before it sank. Some neighbors who had once snubbed me started stopping by my house, awkwardly apologizing, asking about fishing permits for their kids, wondering if there was still a way to have access to the lake now that Karen was out of the picture. I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. I smiled, I shook their hands, and I told them the truth. The lake would be open for community events again, but this time it would be fair, open, and free from tyrants. As for Karen, she made one last desperate move that showed just how far gone she was. One evening, security cameras caught her, and two of her cronies sneaking onto the lake property under cover of darkness, bottles in hand, trying to pour chemicals into the water, probably hoping to create an environmental hazard she could use to rally the neighborhood against me. We caught the whole thing on video, every second, and the next morning, the police caught her red-handed when she came back, probably to check on the damage she hoped she caused. Trespassing charges, environmental violation investigations, a local news story about the HOA president caught sabotaging community property. Her reputation, what was left of it, went up in flames. And standing there, watching her get led away from the lake she thought she owned, all I could think was how poetic it all was. She had spent years building a throne out of fear and lies. And in the end, it crumbled under her own greed. All it took was someone willing to fight back, someone who knew how to play the long game better than she did. Someone who wasn't afraid to lose a few battles, because he was always aiming to win the war. I didn't buy that lake to lock it away or to punish the community, even though some days after what Karen put us through, I was sorely tempted. I bought it to protect it. To give my daughter, and kids like her, a place where memories could be made without fear of fines, dirty looks, or some bitter bureaucrat slapping down rules like they were commandments from the heavens. So, after Karen's meltdown, after the lawsuit started piling up against her, after she officially resigned in disgrace, I decided it was time to rebuild, not just the community's access to the lake, but their trust in each other. It wasn't going to be easy. Years of fear and control had left people suspicious, fractured. Even after Karen was gone, you could feel it. Little pockets of hesitation, neighbors still unsure if they could trust one another, or if another tyrant would just rise up to take her place. So I called a meeting. Not at the HOA office. Not at the clubhouse Karen used like her personal throne room. I hosted it right in my backyard, overlooking the water that had once been the center of all her schemes. I invited every homeowner in the community, except the few remaining HOA board members who had backed Karen to the bitter end. Word spread fast. That Saturday, almost every family showed up. Some came out of curiosity. Some came out of anger. A lot came out of hope. They brought lawn chairs, folding tables, even a few coolers of lemonade. It wasn't just a meeting. It felt like a community coming out of hiding for the first time in years. When everyone had settled, I stood up on my back porch and laid it out straight. I told them what really happened with the lake, why I bought it, and what I planned to do with it. I revealed that I was forming a non-profit community trust to permanently protect the lake from private development, manipulation, and exploitation. No single person would own it again. Not me, not any HOA president, not some outside developer. It would belong to the community, forever. Managed by an elected board, with open books and term limits, and strict rules against any one person consolidating power. And to seal it, I announced the lake's new name, Rachel's Lake. Named after my wife, the woman who had taught me that real strength wasn't about crushing your enemies. It was about lifting people up when they had been beaten down. I didn't stop there. I knew that just fixing the lake wouldn't fix the HOA's broken culture. So I proposed reforms, real ones. Term limits for board members. Transparent financial reports every quarter. Mandatory community votes for major decisions. An independent ethics committee made up of rotating volunteers to oversee HOA activities. No more secret backroom deals. No more rule bending for friends. No more selective punishment. If people wanted it, we could build a community worth being proud of, a real one, not a dictatorship in disguise. There was silence at first, not because people disapproved, but because they were stunned. For so long they'd been told they had no voice, no choice. Karen had trained them to think that resistance was useless. But as the minutes passed, one by one, they started clapping. Tentative at first, then louder, stronger, until the whole backyard roared with applause. For the first time since moving there, I felt like maybe, just maybe, this neighborhood could be something better than a collection of scared houses and bitter smiles. And then, just when I thought I had delivered my last surprise, I dropped the final bombshell. I told them that during the chaos of Karen's downfall, I had quietly been buying mortgage notes from Lakeside National Bank. Not properties, mortgage notes, debt, carefully, legally. About 20% of the community's homes, including Karen's old house, were now tied to notes that my holding company owned. I explained I wasn't there to kick anyone out or demand balloon payments. Quite the opposite. I was offering refinancing at below market rates to any homeowner who wanted it. Lower payments, better terms, no tricks, no strings attached. All they had to do was vote to implement the reforms we had just discussed. Protect the lake, protect each other, break the old cycle. The shock on their faces was unforgettable. A few older residents openly wept. People came up to me afterward. People who had barely spoken to me before, thanking me, offering hugs, promising to volunteer for the new committees. Even some of Karen's old loyalists, realizing which way the wind was blowing, quietly signed up to support the reforms. It was more than just winning against Karen. It was about healing wounds that had festered too long under her rule. In the weeks that followed, the transformation was almost magical. The new HOA charter was ratified nearly unanimously. The new community trust was formally established, and Rachel's Lake became a protected landmark. Fishing returned. Families brought their kids back to the water. We even launched a junior conservation program, teaching kids about the ecosystem and sustainable fishing practices. And my daughter, she didn't just smile anymore. She thrived. She started helping teach the younger kids, leading little nature walks along the lake, talking about algae blooms and base spawning cycles, like she was a young scientist in training. I hadn't seen that spark in her since before my wife got sick. That lake didn't just save our community, it saved my family. Karen, meanwhile, became something of a ghost story. Her house languished on the market for months, finally selling far below asking price once word of her crimes spread through the real estate networks. She was last seen trying to start over in another state, but with criminal charges hanging over her and lawsuits piling up, her days of empire building were done. The mayor who had backed her quietly announced he wasn't seeking re-election. Transparency became the new buzzword in local politics. Other communities started calling, asking how we had done it, wanting advice on how to reform their own toxic HOAs. As for me, I didn't run for office. I didn't seek any official title. I didn't need to. It was enough to walk along the shores of Rachel's Lake, watching neighbors fish, barbecue, laugh. It was enough to see kids playing without fear, parents chatting without suspicion. A real community, not a battleground. Sometimes the best revenge isn't burning your enemy's house down. It's building something better right next to it. Something they can never touch, never tear down, never claim for themselves. If you're stuck fighting your own HOA nightmare, remember this. The rules they hide behind can be your greatest weapon. If you have the patience, the smarts, and the heart to use them right. Never let a bully convince you that the battle isn't worth it. Because sometimes winning isn't about making them lose. It's about making sure they can never hurt anyone again. And that's exactly what we did.